everyone, welcome to another episode of Spill the Tea with Tommy D. This week we're going to finish our series on Yunnan Sourcing, and we are going to do a pure black tea. We are going to do a Mei Ren Liang Mountain Yunnan Black Tea. That is a mouthful, and I hope I didn't butcher it, as I probably do many other things. So, the reason why it's called this, as similar to the tea we did last week, so the Wulang Mountain in China is where this tea is grown. So that's where it gets part of the name, and Yunnan is it's like the area, the Yunnan province. I think it's a province. So this one, it's a pure black tea. So as we've learned in the past, that means it is completely oxidized. The tea leaves are picked. They are oxidized. This one, I did find out, I mean, all black teas are fully oxidized, but they actually let this one sit a little extra longer. And what helps the teas oxidize is they do like a break, like they kind of shake it, and they do like these different methods to break the cell walls. And when you break the cell walls of the leaf, it oxidizes better. So this one, they do an extra kind of rigorous shaking with the tea leaves to further oxidize it. So we can expect it to have a pretty solid flavor. I don't know how these guys ended up all over this way. The leaves of this tea are a very long, very large, long, twisted leaves. They have, some of them are pretty twisted, some of them are not, some of them are just bent a little bit. So it's definitely way different from the needle white tea that we saw last week. The leaves kind of smell almost like, it kind of reminds me almost a little bit of our cooked pu'er that we did, because it has some natural notes of cocoa. The cooked pu'er had cocoa in it, but this one, just the pure leaves have a little bit of cocoa to it, very smooth. And then I kind of smell a little bit of almost like a wood, almost like an oak or a mahogany kind of bark scent to it. Kind of reminds me of a tree. And it smells really good. It looks really good. Check it out one more time. And we are going to do, for this one, it's a pure black tea. So we are actually going to do, I put 3 teaspoons in here. We're going to use boiling water. And I'm going to steep it for 3 minutes. This one I think is going to be a little, you can have a little more play with this. You could do maybe 2 teaspoons for 5 minutes. I'm going to do a couple steeps with this after, so I decided I'm going to do 3 teaspoons for 3 minutes and see how that goes. So let's brew this tea. We have our 3 teaspoons in our cup. I'm going to take my strainer, tea leaves in here, boom. Let's get some hot water in there. Again, 205, no need for ice cubes for this black tea. And here we go. So I don't really understand the name stereotypes. Like, for example, the big one right now is Karen. Everyone's talking about the Karens. If you don't know, Karen tends to be a woman in like her later 30s, early 40s with children. Has that like short kind of haircut, sunglasses, and a "can I ask for a manager" attitude. Now, yes, do those exist? But I think the stereotype is way too strong. It's kind of unfair, because I work with people, and I'd be helping a woman, like the nicest customer ever, and they'll be like, "What's your name?" And they're like, "Karen." And I was like, "Oh, that's different." I'm like, "But your hair goes past your shoulder, you're so nice." But like, that's unfair. Because like, just because someone's named Karen shouldn't mean that they're like that. For the same reason that, like, you know, just because one Kyle drank too much Monster and put his fist through some drywall doesn't mean they all do that. You know, not every Chad plays sports. I'm sure there's one dad out there named his kid Chad, and he's like, he's going to be a champion football star, and now he plays D&D. I'm sure it happens. I'm a victim of this too, actually. If you think about it, Tom, there's that stereotype, the peeping Tom, because apparently Lady Godiva wanted to walk through the streets naked. One guy took a peek and his name was Tom. Like, that's not fair. If I'm cooking chicken, I open up the oven too early. I'm like, oh, sorry, miss. Didn't mean to take a peek at those breasts. Sorry, that was a bad one. All right, strike one. So I can kind of validate the Karen stereotype because I think you're in your late 30s. She probably has a bunch of kids. The reason why her hair is short, she doesn't have time in the morning. She's wearing those sunglasses because she got no sleep and she's got bags under her eyes. She's not happy right now. So she walks in the store. After she's been up since 6 in the morning. She gets the kids in the car finally. She's going to get her caramel macchiato. She's like, I'm just going to run in there real quick. I'll leave the windows open. She runs in and boom, big line. She's pissed. Now, do I think it's right? No. And like I said, I've met Karens that were the stereotype Karens. I've met Karens that weren't the stereotype Karens. I've met, Susans or Fionas that were annoying. But it makes no sense. Because I think that's why it's good to name your children a kind of unique name. Because, Cornelius is not going to be expected to drink Monster and punch his fist through some drywall. And for the same reason, like, Bethany isn't going to ask for a manager. I don't know, it makes sense. Apple, pilot inspector, they kind of did it right. I know those kids, they might get picked on, but they're not going to be stereotyped. Alright, let's taste this tea. So we now have a brewed cup of our Mei Ren Wulang Mountain Yunnan Black Tea from Yunnan Sourcing. Let's check it out. It actually yielded a much lighter brew than I expected. From the description of it being highly oxidized, shaken very well, I almost would have expected it to be darker. But it's a very nice burnt orange, kind of reminds me of like fall leaves actually, which is a little surprising because this tea was actually picked in early March, which kind of is more of that sweet spring, early spring teas. I smell much more. I almost smell none of the cocoa now. That sweetness of the cocoa is almost completely gone. Now I almost get like a sweet potato. It's kind of like a sweet potato and more of that kind of like woody oak mahogany kind of deal. I kind of like it. It smells really nice. It smells very fresh. Okay. Wow, these tea leaves got big. It got so big. I'm so proud. Oh, jeez. All right. Whoa. So the tea leaves smell much more like, I'd say much more like the wood and like and when I say sweet potato, it's almost weird. It always reminds me of like the skin of a sweet potato. Let's take a look at these guys here. Yeah, you can see them really untwist. They're still a little twisted, so I'm sure they'll untwist a little bit more after that steep. So hopefully this is now cool enough to drink and I won't burn my mouth, but we all know what to do, right? I'm gonna sniff it again. Yep, kind of wood-like, a little bit of that sweet potato. It's very smooth, very low very low astringency. So that kind of further clarifies that if you wanted to experiment with the flavors of this type of tea, you're not really going to burn the tea leaves on this one, and it probably won't get that bitter if you wanted to experiment with different tea scoops and times. This one is a lot more play. It's good. It's very smooth. I say this is a very solid black tea. It has a kind of a medium to heavier body. but not as much body as like the cooked pu'er. So surprisingly, like I said, it's based on what they told me. I expected it to be a much more darker, bolder flavor, but it must be the area, the leaves and stuff. It has much more of a sweet, smooth, like I said, sweet potato, a little bit of like wood bark kind of flavor to it. I like it. This is kind of more of what you consider a complex tea, because when we talked about like those layers of the tea, if you only did like 2 teaspoons for 2 minutes, you might get more of, say, maybe you get more of that cocoa actually. If you did like 3 teaspoons for 5 minutes, it might taste like way different. It might taste like a cup of bark. I don't, we have to, it's the kind of tea that you can have a little bit more fun with and a little bit more play. So, if this sounds something, the leaves smell so good. If this is something you think you might be interested in, again, check out Yunnan Sourcing. They're not going to have those fancy flavors that we were doing for a couple weeks. This is much more of the pure tea leaves. But they definitely have some of the highest quality tea. They really know their stuff at Yunnan Sourcing. Cool. So, I just ordered another series of teas. I'm going to do a kind of a special episode on matcha. Matcha doesn't have a steep time, so there's not going to be much, shit talking for that episode. But I'm doing the matcha episode because when I used to work at a tea shop, one of my first customers ever that I still talk to this day asked me to do a matcha episode. And it's so rare that you kind of continue. So I will be doing an episode on matcha, how to do it properly, how to whisk it. And if anyone else, he asked me to do matcha, so if anyone else has any other loose leaf tea companies or loose leaf tea flavors that I haven't touched on and maybe I missed, there is so much out there, and we are going to continue this journey as we brew tea and poke holes in the nonsense of the world that is going on today. So please like, share, subscribe, send me your comments, suggestions, and yeah, stop stereotyping people in annoying ways, because get to know them first before you go clarifying them based on their name. Alright, so we'll see you next time.